I promised to kind of share a few slides. I have actually way too many slides for this time. I have like 30 slides, and so let's see how this goes. So I'll quickly because in my role, the benefit of this is that I just focus on journey management. So I do nothing else. And the people that I talk to, if they are not talking about journey management, I'm not interested. My wife and kids are the exception, but the relatives, they are on the borderline. So I get to hear a lot of the kind of the patterns, like what works, what doesn't work, why did it fail? And I've been trying to kind of put together this kind of like a presentation on that, how organizations go from starting journey management then to scaling, and what are those kind of pitfalls and what are the keys that the success. So hopefully you can take some of the ideas from this and implement in your own organization. I also built, like Marianne had the CX maturity model. I've been also like kind of mapping how the organizations start using journey management. And usually it starts that there are pretty much in every organization's customer journeys have been used in projects. And we saw in Simon's presentation, there was this picture where people were looking at the journey on the wall and everybody was excited. And then after that project, everybody went away and the journey was like collecting dust somewhere. So that has been quite often, but quite often you hear like a lot of good kind of experiences from that. So that's usually where somebody starts to think that how about if we start actually not just understanding this part of the customer experience, but how about if we understand the whole customer experience and start to actually then think about that. What is the customers actually going through with us? What are those different journeys? And you start mapping those journeys and you realize that, oh shit, that's a lot of work. Now you need to actually do a lot of research, a lot of mapping in order to get to that holistic level. Then when you start thinking about that, okay, so if you map all these journeys, that's a lot of work. How do we keep those up to date? Because like the moment that you have done the research and you have mapped the journey, it actually starts to lose relevance. 1 year from now, things have changed, and the journey, if you don't keep it up to date, is not relevant anymore. And that's when like a lot of the journey management platforms, what they now are talking a lot about is like how do we connect your kind of real-time data sources onto those journeys. Not just the CX metrics, but the business KPIs as well and metrics. And then once you do that, then the journeys are evergreen, so they're always up to date. Of course, if things change radically, you need to do qualitative research to kind of map it again. But like by and large, they stay relevant by doing that. But this is not journey management. This is just scaling the understanding your customers. So if you get to this level, it's good. You understand what the customers are going through. You might even understand how organizations are, how your customers are, like which are the most important journeys and which are the ones that they're struggling with. But it's not really management. You're not really driving the change in your organization. So from this point of on, the next step is to go into the management. And now you need to start thinking about that. We just talked about the ownership, who owns the journeys, and the purpose of the ownership is that somebody actually has the incentive to push these things forward. And especially if you look at the kind of macro level journeys, they are like omni-channel journeys, so there's not necessarily always logical owners for that. But you need to find those people who are the ones who will champion and hopefully they have also the mandate to make decisions. Then you need to think about that, okay, how do we make decisions today? Because what journey management really ultimately tries to do is tries to kind of customer-centrify your decision making. So how you make decisions, you probably today, most of the organizations, it's a lot about assumptions, a lot about internal politics, a lot about continuations. We've been doing this, so let's keep doing this. Journey management tries to bring that customer viewpoint and customer value thinking in those decision-making moments. So you need to understand how do we make decisions today, and then you need to integrate into those processes. The good thing is that we are not there to kind of completely change everything. This is really about integrating. So we do a lot of upfront work, and we bring the data for your existing decision-making forms. So this is where quite a few organizations aim to go to. So the aspiration level is here. So we understand customers, we scale them connect the journey mapping, and we have a way to actually impact the decision making so that the right things get prioritized on the journey. Last year we heard from Simon the Danske Bank example, which is the level 5, which is that you actually reorganize the whole organization around those journeys. And the key difference, and I know that Simon is way more equipped to talk about this, what is the difference? But the key difference here is that you don't go begging for resources and those decisions from multiple different decision-making forums, because you have those people and resources aligned for those journeys, so it's easy to make decisions. So that it enables you to move much, much faster with less friction within the organization. One thing to keep in mind, journey management, it is a transformation, so it takes time. So don't think about it that this is something that we do this spring and then we're done. To get to this point, it's like minimum 12 to 18 months. And that is not yet even scaled. It's just the initial pilot with success within one limited organization. So don't think about it as a sprint. So then, what are the do's and don'ts that I've seen, and some of the mistakes that I've made myself, because we all make mistakes. So the first thing is that too many of those initiatives, they never actually go beyond the CX or design bubble. So we stay quite happily within the our own team, where with the believers that everybody, we don't need to sell this to anybody. It's like everybody buys into this idea of that, okay, journeys are important, and we work there and we have the brilliant insights and opportunities mapped. And then we walk out from the classroom and we realize that nobody cares. We can't drive the impact. So what you need to really do is that from the get-go, look for the other people from other organization departments and bring them along. They need to be along from the beginning. Don't think about that, let's do this first here and then we start educating the rest. I would bring them along from the beginning, because then they are part of the change, and you don't need to later on convince them to change. They are actually impacting the change. Then, and this is what Simon was talking a lot about, is that start with a business problem. So start with the business problem and then position journey management as a way to solve that business problem. So when you start, like I said, that it takes 12 to 18 months, but you also only have 12 to 18 months because there might be, like what Luis explained, that there will be a reorg. And then if you haven't been able to prove that this actually has an impact, then the new organization structure and the new leadership might think that, okay, let's scrap this and do something else. There's always a new thing that somebody's trying to push in the organization. So you have the 12 to 18 months and you better deliver the impact. Don't just focus on mapping journeys and understanding the customers, but you really need to go and so that this is what we actually changed, and keep track on the things that you have actually changed. Because I just recently spoke with one large Nordic bank who did journey management for 2 years. There was a reorg, and the new supervisor asked, so what did you actually deliver on? And they hadn't actually thought about that they needed to prove that. And it was deprioritized for the whole company. And now that person actually switched jobs after that. And when you start, make a splash. So we in Nordics, it comes, at least for me and all the Finns, it comes this thinking that you do the work well and you don't talk about it. And then when it's done, there will be a reward in the end. I was I was in last year in the Beyond the Map conference in Barcelona, and there was Dan Sullivan, who used to work for Teidu, but now he's actually working in-house role, driving journey management in CHS Health in US. And he had such a refreshing approach to journey management, because his approach from the beginning was that let's build this internal go-to-market plan. So how do we get the rest of the organization on board? So they built this physical space in their headquarters where they talk about the journey management, they talk about the customer life cycle, They built the Confluence page where anybody can go and learn about the journey management through the videos that they package there. And if you are interested, then you can there's a call to action, so you can just say that, hey, our team could actually be benefit, and then they will support that. And they managed to they started from the bottom, but because they made such a big noise about this, they managed to get to the leadership team and get the buy-in from them, and not just the leadership team, but also for the middle management. So don't just think about that, let's do this, and when we are successful, then we talk about it. If you're starting today, start talking about it tomorrow. It's really important that you get the rest of the organization on board. Then the benefit, and this is something that when I started and when I was thinking about journey management in the first place, I thought that, okay, it's a lot of mapping and a lot of work, that is this actually worthwhile? But the good thing is that you don't need to map everything at once, and you can't actually manage everything at once. So you need to think about what are those journeys that you actually need to manage, what are the important ones, and what are the maps that you go in when you actually have decided that let's improve, like for instance, onboarding, let's then start mapping that journey. So don't think about that you need to do a lot of mapping before you actually can go into journey management. And reminder, mapping isn't management, so you really need to think about that, how do we make impact? Without impact, you probably won't succeed. So try to really make an impact for the organization. Then there was somebody said that maybe we should own the journeys. I actually disagree. I think we shouldn't think ourselves that we are the end game. We might have to take the ownership in the beginning to push it and drive the change, but try to look at other people to take the ownership. And start from the business side if you are in a private sector. Because immediately when you assign the ownership for somebody who has KPIs that they actually get bonuses, like what Simon was saying, suddenly there's a lot of drive and push to actually make those happen, because there's a Christmas coming and I need to get some nice presents for the family. So find the other people. Our role is to really to be at least from my point of view, we are the center of excellence. So we are there to support, help, but the ownership should be really somewhere in the other parts of the organization. But that's all that we have today. I thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really a pleasure having you here. Thank you.